The iMore Show is brought to you today by SoftLayer. SoftLayer delivers cloud built for privacy. Your business applications and computational workloads are unique, so you deserve cloud resources that meet your specific needs. SoftLayer is the only cloud providers that provisions dedicated servers and virtual servers, all on demand, all connected to the same open API, all connected to the global private network, allowing you to scale your workloads up and down quickly and have ample space for your storage-intensive tasks. All of our listeners have the opportunity to get $500 of cloud infrastructure by visiting softlayer.com/podcast. Thank you, SoftLayer. It is November 30, 2015. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we are doing a crossover spectacular with Android Central. This is the iMore Show. Joining me this week, it has been far too long, my good friend and the editor-in-chief of Android Central, Phil Nickinson. How are you, Phil?
It's the Monday after Thanksgiving here in the States. I might have eaten a little too much, slept too little, and watched too much football face.
Plus, you had kids home for days.
Plus my kids were off school, which is maybe the most stressful part of the whole thing.
But you, amongst all people, can't you just throw like 1,000 phones at them, and by the time they dig themselves out, they go back to school?
Funny thing happened is that my kid did drop her, the phone she'd been using, and so I had to figure out which one I was going to. Well, no, I don't want to be that dad. First, I had to be like, all right, are we just gonna like grab one out of the box? Are we gonna make her work it off? Or are we gonna try to repair it? We tried it. I went to see if we could get it repaired. So I was like, maybe it'll be like $20-$30, whatever. And they would have had to replace the display along with it, like the actual display, not just the glass. And they're like, yeah, $109. Yeah, no thanks. I can do better than that.
Was that one of those corner display repair shops?
Yeah, totally.
No, we have those here too now. They're actually pretty awesome. They're pretty cheap, especially for devices that are out of warranty. They're really fast.
Not as cheap as my magical box of phones I have behind me.
She's got the cha-cha now. Well, that's actually, I didn't mean to talk about that first, but that's actually an interesting thing because my little godkids now, they were given Bitsbox, which is this thing where you basically type in some JavaScript the way we used to get computer magazines, and you type in the code. And they made, at first they make these little programs, like they call in pre-made sprites and the things happen. And they're 7 and 10 now. And now they've learned enough JavaScript that they can go in and change things. Like what they do, of course, is pick the human guy and make him explode in funny ways because they're kids. But it's amazing to me how young they're starting to program and the quality of programs that they can do.
My eldest has started, and I have Russell Hawley, one of our writers, to thank for that, is using code.org. And yes. So it's basically, it's drag and drop kind of logic stuff. And there was actually an Android thing, I totally forget the name of it, a couple years ago, where it was very much the same thing. You just make workflows, and then it would actually spit out an APK you could install on a phone. It was really cool. But this one, they're using examples like Minecraft and stuff like that, and she loves Minecraft. And I still don't totally understand Minecraft. Like, I get it, but I don't get it.
It's virtual Lego, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like, okay, that looks like, and she's flying around, and I'm lost, and I feel like old dad.
Yeah. So these are web-based programs, but you can scan a barcode and the program shows up on your iPad or your other tablet. And I just like that they're doing this because by the time they're 12, Phil, they'll have replaced us. Oh,
I know, and I really hope they do.
All right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about was mobile photography, because you go back a year or 2 years, and just you could not say that cameras were universally good. Like, you'd have to pick and choose the things that you wanted, and cameras were one of the things you'd have to consider. But I feel like this year was a breakthrough year now, and it's not hard to find a bad camera, but almost all the flagship phones have great cameras now.
Yeah, I mean, especially on Android, that was kind of the one big sticking point was maybe the camera's okay. Here's this awesome phone that you love in every other way, but the camera sucks, and you feel like you need to carry something else, or you just settle for these mediocre photos and then start over processing them in Instagram, which I've done tons of to compensate for it. But for the first time, we really, I think, pick any manufacturer and they have an option that means you don't have to settle for that. Well, maybe Motorola is still the one holdout there, but they're really solidifying the mid-price. But the new Nexus phones and the camera has always been the thing there. Nexus 6P camera is really good. It's not the best, I don't think, but it's good enough for my purposes, which is, general social sharing. I probably wouldn't use it to, take pictures I'm going to print out a lot. But even then, I mean, it really just depends on the resolution. Samsung, obviously, probably the best, I think. LG is a really close second. And you can make the argument that LG is the best. Both of those have manual controls now, which is a lot of fun in RAW. If you have the patience for setting up shots like that, you can do some really cool stuff. I don't always have that patience though, so for me, it's a lot of just which shoots the best automatic. Motorola is still they've gotten better. They paid a little more attention to that. Who else do I have laying here on my desk? HTC with the A9 with the HTC iPhone. Sorry, not sorry. It's what it looks like. What are you going to do? It has gotten a lot better. So I've got some hope for HTC in 2016. We'll see. I hope I have hope. I think I have hope.
I love HTC. I still love them. I still love them from the Trio Pro days, and I really want them to be successful.
I tell you, probably on the outskirts, you've heard this HTC Vive talk, this virtual reality, and I'm still not 100% sure where they're going with it. It's a partnership with Steam. It's so cool. If you ever get the chance to try a Vive demo, do it. I haven't done it. God, it's been about 9 months. And what I used was a prototype. It still had connected, it had wires on the controllers, and now it's wireless. But it's so cool. I was telling my wife about it again this weekend. I mean, it's so crazy to think I was in a kitchen demonstration and I dropped a pan and I moved my foot out of the way because I didn't want it to get hurt. My brain knows I'm in this simulation, but didn't completely, give into it. It was crazy.
Yeah, I went to the Oculus demo, and I've gone to them for several years. I went to the one this year at CES, and the thing that still threw me is that I couldn't see my hands. Like, the world was getting so good to the point that it actually started to bother me that I would reach for things and not see hands. It almost scared me.
Yeah, no, I mean, wait until you try Vive. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so the thing, this is just the Facebook paranoia in me, but I always imagine, like, on a browser, you can just close the window. On a smartphone, you can just close the Facebook app. Once that thing is sitting on your head, you're in a Facebook world until you take it off.
It's virtual reality very much is the future. Just what future, I don't know.
VR, AR, because you've tried both. You had Google Glass for a long time.
Yeah,
too.
no, look, and we've got a lot of new. There's this weird in between, right? We have, and this is one that I really think you guys ought to push a little more, is the cardboard type stuff. This lower end, very simplistic, puts 2 images up on your display. You slip your phone into some sort of cardboard goggles, or Mattel has a new Viewmaster that, in fact, I've got one waiting for me somewhere. I need to go pick it up today. And you have this very low cost, I hate to say simplistic but it is in the scheme of virtual reality, but this thing with a very low barrier to entry that everyone can try. And it's a lot of fun. My kids love it. They might be getting one for Christmas, and it's cross-platform, which is even better. Samsung's is a step above that, but the problem there is it's Samsung only. So, I mean, not a small market, but still a limited one.
Yeah, my thing is that I'm claustrophobic, so I think intellectually I like the idea of AR better than VR because I can still see the world around me. Sure. It's just got computery stuff on top of it.
Yep. Yeah, and in the
computer world.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got the really good cameras now. The cameras are working on VR, but what's next for cameras, Phil? That's my big question, because for years they've been working on just getting good megapixels, good photos. Is low light still the big boundary here? Is it something else? Depth?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the stretch is how good an experience can you get at the price point that the manufacturer needs to hit.
And with super thin phones.
Yeah, and there are physical limitations, right? So, I mean, sensor size and Z-stack and how much they want to spend on the lenses themselves. And I remember Brian Klug, formerly of AnonTech, did this incredible talk I was in one time. And I had no idea all the things that went into mobile, photography. Had no idea that there are like 6 and 7 lenses stacked together.
And he's an optical engineer.
Yeah, he's an optical engineer, so he knows this stuff. And I had no clue. And so, like, once that revelation hit, it's like, holy crap, this is a big deal, and I get why it's difficult. And then you have all the processing and all the software that goes into that, and somebody has to pay for that. And at the end of the day, it all has to work together. You have to have a good camera app, and that's not always the case. For as much better as the Nexus phones are now, I'm still not crazy about Google's camera app.
I still have this giant phone on the back of this Lumia phone.
Yeah, so I got the new 950 XL over the weekend, and it's a weird device. I don't know.
Is it a giant honking camera too?
It's not that big. It's still the same sort of design. I need to get out and try it some. But yeah, then there's Windows Phone.
Because we shoot like we try to shoot as much as we can with iPhones, like even video. But there, for some things, I still have to pull out my DSLR. Like if I want really like crazy bokeh.
Yeah, but why are you apologizing for that? I mean, there's absolutely a place for a real camera, especially in our line of work. I would never in a million years consider taking, you know, something that I want to use over and over, or that I want to highlight some product or whatever. I would never in a million years use a smartphone camera. It's like using it's like using a tiny little hammer when you need a jackhammer to get the job done. You know
but I don't want to carry that jackhammer, Phil. They're so heavy, and the lenses are so big and expensive.
All right, yeah. So my other camera, my camera I've been using all the time is in the shop. You know, so I'm back to my D700,
right?
And that's, I mean, this is what you're used to. Micro Four Thirds is what you need to use, because that is a really good and not inexpensive in between there.
Yeah, so Leo had the Sony Alpha, Alpha, and his $7,000 lens.
Oh yeah, no, that's insane. I'm not sure I'm a good enough photographer for this, but I've gotten a lot better over the years. But yeah, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, Serenity's been shooting with a 40mm pancake, I think, and getting really, really good results.
Yeah, but no, you I'm saying it right now. Quit using your iPhone, Rene.
Well, you can tell, like you can tell on the site, it's obvious when I'm using a DSLR, because you have that incredible depth of field and really high, like I think it's 23 megapixels, and
it looks much better.
Yeah. Well, you think we'll get there though, Phil? I mean, everyone's buying all, like Google and Apple are buying all these crazy camera companies with all this new technology.
No, I mean, there are physical aspects at work here, and there should be. So no, I mean, it's getting better. It's getting a lot better, but I mean, there's a reason why why cameras like this exist. There's a reason why this isn't a phone. Think about it from that direction.
I don't know. I saw Sasha Sagan tweeting from a camera many occasions.
Oh, look, yeah. I mean, they could shove one in there if they wanted to. In the early Samsung cameras, they had like that. Like you could make a call, you could play Angry Birds in the back of this thing, and it was kind of ridiculous. One
of the things that we didn't see take off, even though Android was doing Face Unlock for a while, Microsoft is doing Face Unlock now. Apple bought Prime Sense. There's still the Xbox Connect technology. But as much as our voice assistants have gotten really, really good, we haven't done as much with with visual intelligence. You think that's just because people still find it a little odd?
Yeah, I mean, that's some of it. Look at Microsoft's new Iris stuff, and it's pretty interesting. So it depends on what they're trying to do. It depends on why they're trying to do it. Just because you can do something on one of these phones doesn't mean you should. What's easier, messing around with all this software that tracks your face and figures out, you know, recognition, or just putting in a damn PIN code or fingerprints? And fingerprints to me are really the big one. I think we finally got it right on Android, and it's taken a couple of years. But I think when developers really start using it on our side of the fence, it's going to be a much bigger deal.
Yeah, like it could read your face and just copy that in an emoji. So you don't have to go through and select the emoji anymore. You just make the face you want, and it just.
Or I just open the keyboard and say, hey, look, there it is, tap it.
Yeah, the sensor stuff is really cool. Apple still got theirs on the bottom, which means you have that big chin with the home button. Android has got theirs in the back. I'm wondering if in a generation or two, we'll just have them in the screen and we won't even need a distinct button anymore.
Yeah, no, that's where they're moving. You know, and Samsung still got its down on the home button, and I'll be interested to see if they ever get rid of that, if they ever move that. There is one train of thought that when Motorola switched from AMOLED displays to LCD, that the reason they did so is because eventually that starts pushing them in the direction of the fingerprint scanner being under that glass. And that's it. It's going to be interesting to see if that's any better. I mean, my question is, where's your thumb hit, right?
Yeah.
Hit down here, does it hit up here? Are you going to be able to recognize it everywhere? I'm still a big proponent of the buttons on the back of the phone. I thought it was crazy when LG first did it, but it's just really a natural place for your finger to hit, whether it's for volume and power, whether it's for fingerprint. Do I have where's my V10? Hang on, let me grab this thing.
So many phones. He's going to get a shuffle.
There it is. So I've got one here that has all three, right? So I've got volume, up, down, power, and fingerprint. And this button's not 100% awesome, but the idea is really interesting.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we have all these rumors. Like for a while, it's been rumored that Apple's working on an iPhone without a home button. It'll use some version of Force Press. It'll have the Touch ID on the screen and use some Force Press technology. Now they're even talking about getting rid of the rumor is that they'll get rid of 3.5mm headset jacks. And that's been around for what, like 100 years. Or
yeah, I mean, look, it's 2015.
HTC tried, right? They had
why do we still have these headphone jacks? Now, Apple doing it would be a little more than a little controversial because you have all these accessories that use that jack, and a
Yes.
lot more so than I think anyone else.
Square
So
readers, right?
yeah, I mean that's a big one, right?
Yeah. So, but it's interesting to think, like, because we all watch the same sci-fi movies. We've seen Avatar, we've seen Iron Man, and they basically use little sheets of glass, and that's all that their phone is, and everything is projected on it or from it. But then you look at the technology, you look at the patents, and you look where this stuff is going, and it seems like inevitably that's sort of where we're headed.
Yeah, everything moves in that direction, and the question is how quickly and how far it deviates from it, I think.
I'm going to tell you about Red Hat, which is tried, tested, and trusted. What does it mean when every commercial bank in the Fortune 100 relies on Red Hat for enterprise software, or every department in the executive branch of the U.S. government, or every airline in the Fortune Global 500? It means that more than 90% of all companies in the Fortune 100 understand the value of supported enterprise open source software can be their business. If the value of open source is a rapid innovation, freedom, interoperability that comes with community power technology, and the value of Red Hat is taking responsibility for that technology, testing it, enhancing security, certifying that it will work with your data center. So what is Red Hat doing to make such a big difference? Well, it's simple, but not easy. They make sure that you get all the benefits of open source without the risk of doing it all yourself. No one else can make that promise, much less keep it. So visit redhat.com and see how to help your enterprise with application development, storage, and cloud computing. Red Hat, different for the sake of better technology. Yeah, do you have an ideal phone, Phil? I ask you this because I basically get 1 or 2 phones a year, but you get 350 phones a year.
Yes.
Are you leaning towards an ideal form factor, shape, size, anything?
I think I wrote a line. I do a weekly column every Sunday where it's just me riffing on whatever. And I wrote a line this week about how the Nexus 6P, or maybe it was in my second opinion. We've been doing 2 reviews of each phone.
I really like those.
Yeah, it's a nice way to hopefully get some dissenting opinions. That was the idea. But I wrote how the 6P is probably the best phone you can get on Android right now, but it's still maybe not my favorite one. And I think that goes back to, all my phones are behind me today. I think for me, it was the G4. Just, it's big, but doesn't feel too big. I love the buttons on the back. I think LG did really well there. The camera is excellent. Their software is still kind of crap. But as far as like form factor and when this thing works, it works great. But I think the 6P is better all around, and I'm putting a lot more emphasis now and in the future, and both me personally and collectively as a site, on continuous updates, on these monthly security updates that Google's pushing out, that they are hopefully pushing everybody else to do. And we're going to see it's difficult to do, and I appreciate that, but I think it's important. I think it's important for Google to lead the way. I think it's important for Google to find a better way to go about all this, in the same respect as I think, we talk a lot about Google and Apple coming at problems from vastly different directions, but ultimately working for the same thing. And it's sort of the same thing where, to update iTunes on an iOS device, you have to do a whole system update, which is kind of ridiculous. And not just iTunes, but pick any number of features. So for Android, they need to be able to figure out how to get updates working better, not just for Nexus devices, but for anybody else who uses that platform.
Yeah, it's interesting. I took a look because a lot of people want Apple to decouple apps the way Google has and put them in the App Store the way Google has in an Apple Play Store. So I compared the update frequency of podcasts and I think Find My Friends or something, which are 2 apps that went from the store into the OS, and Apple's been updating them more regularly since they've been part of the OS than they did in the store. So it's not just the decoupling. I think it's what you said. It's that active will to update these things. And they were like, I don't even know when Chrome gets updated anymore. They're just pushing new bits continuously. Yep. And I wonder can we trust companies to do that with phones if they just update all the time continuously?
It's like anything else, I think. And it's not like we haven't had system updates on any number of platforms that have gone bad in some respect. I still think the Mac App Store debacle of the past month was just ridiculously bad. Generally speaking, yes. My larger issue with that is transparency. The Google Play Store will update itself automatically. We generally get a heads up of when it happens. Somebody who works for Google will do a Google Plus post, but I would like to see something on the phone that says, hey, we're updating this. Get ready for it. It's coming soon. Update descriptions, change logs are still very hit and miss. And it seems like the larger an app developer you are, just the worse you get at it. And I get that there are lawyers involved. I get that there are multiple versions of apps, but come on. I mean, if you're going to change one of the most important things that I use every single day on my phone, tell me what you changed. It's that simple.
Well, that's my bigger worry, is that instead of so the Mac App Store in one way is a good example of that. So if people aren't familiar with it, what happened was Apple's security certificate expired. They replaced it with one, but they took the opportunity to move to a higher version of the SHA hash. They went from SHA-1 to SHA-2. The thing is that a lot of developers, maybe not a lot, but a significant number of popular developers were using a version of OpenSSL that only supported SHA-1, so those apps all broke. So Apple had to regress down to SHA-1, which is, I mean, like, all these things are theoretically not as good for security with the practical applications, and, you know, who knows. But that's still assuming that we have like an update. Like, this is Google Play Store version 5.1. And I don't know how long it's going to be until that it's not like any version anymore. It's just every day 3 or 4 new bits trickle down and update, and we don't even see them as discrete updates anymore.
Yeah, and it's very much how that works. Google Play Services is another one. It will update itself in the background, which is great. It's not something you should worry about, except for when you get a pop-up that says your version of Google Play Services doesn't work with this device. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, but Siri is the same. Maps are this. All these server-side services are doing this all the time. They get better, and we don't even notice it.
Sure. No, and that's a good thing. That's a lower barrier to entry for the user. It's funny how even small the current version, I need to look it up right now, the number of people on the current version of the Android Central app are. And it's like, why would you not go get the new one? What's wrong with you? We fixed our app. We fixed our end. Let's see. We just pushed one out the other day. We're at 28%.
Yeah, it was like Georgia has like 200 unupdated apps on her phone. It drives me crazy, but she's
nuts.
like, why should I risk it? Why should I
do that? Now, but I also get why people don't put auto update on. And I don't for, business purposes. Yeah. I need to know when things change. But at the same time, if they're not going to bother telling me what changes, and why does it matter?
Yeah, it was an interesting post from Benedict Evans, now he's with Anderson Horowitz, but yeah, it was a couple of years ago about what is an app going to be in a few years. And I kind of didn't pay a lot of attention, but now I look and there's all these instances where apps used to be these bundles. Like, I would go to the Pinterest app and do things, but now I shared a Pinterest, or I Pinterest comes into another app, or it's in a widget, and I don't actually go there anymore. I was joking with the guy who makes the pCalc, the calculator app, that I haven't opened his app in a year. I just pull down Notification Center, do it there, and close it again. Mm-hmm. And the entire concept of what is an app has changed. It's like the web went from websites to all these HTTP services that we pull in web information and web data all the time without going to the web. And now it feels like we're starting to do that with apps, where, and Android's been doing this for years, the data is just shared back and forth, and there's no discrete boundaries anymore.
And it was getting really weird with Android as BB10 included the framework. Microsoft flirted with it, though they've apparently pulled back some.
The bridge, right?
Yeah, they were going to make it really easy to, if not run Android apps on a Windows phone, then to port them over and change all the hooks that needed to be changed. So for a while, I was thinking, well, are Android APKs, like, is that just going to become the default application for anything that's not iOS? And really all it is an APK is just a zip file with XML and assets and stuff in it. And from there it calls, APIs within the framework. But are Android apps going to become the default apps for anything that aren't iOS? And how does that affect developers? How does that affect those of us who cover it? How does that affect, I'm not a developer, but I am somebody who is responsible for an application that is available for users. So do I now have to give 2 Fs about people on BlackBerry or Windows Phone using this app that we very much developed for Android?
Yeah, and you've been saying for years that you shouldn't think of Android as a platform, but as a platform for platforms.
Yeah, it very much is. And again, it depends on what you're talking about, right? So you've got Android, the base code, which is 14, 15 million lines of code, and that's it. You've got Android as Samsung sees it. You've got Android as Motorola sees it. You've got Android as Nexus sees it, which is really how Google sees it. While AOSP is this conglomerate, it's Google, whether we like it or not. There are a whole bunch of different ways to
You've
talk
got Android
about
embedded, where you might not even know that it's being run on your appliance
all the time. Yeah. There was a really interesting Q&A that Chris Ziegler at The Verge did with, I think it was somebody from GM, about why you won't see something like iOS or Android used as the embedded OS for automobile infotainment systems. And that's not necessarily the wrong way to go. I took a lot away from that. But yeah, I mean, it's still funny for me to see the Linux Penguin when a airline reboots its IFE.
Yeah, or kernel panics on the seat in front of you.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, generally speaking, we define Android to fit whatever argument we're trying to make. So, if somebody says Android is good at this or bad at this, it's generally they're speaking about something more specific than this entire operating system.
Yeah, and it's super interesting to me, especially this year when we started to see things like Android Auto and CarPlay and things like Apple Watch and Android Wear take off, because I have an app on my phone, but that app can be surfaced in my car. It's on my phone, but it can be surfaced on my wrist. The notifications go to both places. The navigation can be pushed back. It's not like it used to be this little box, Phil. I'd put something on it and I would run it on this little box, and now it's so much more than that.
The car stuff is really intriguing to me, especially from the Android side, because they're piggybacking the same sort of casting technology, and that comes from Chromecast, where you are in one way using your phone to initiate something somewhere else. It's a little different because the phone is actually plugged into the car, and probably will be for a while. I know they're all working on wireless, but the car is this extension. But they're putting a big bet on that, in that the back end software on that, the stuff that's on the head units in the vehicles, needs to be pretty robust, because that's not something you're going to be able to change very often, if ever.
Yeah, it's super fascinating to me because, with iOS 8, we got extensibility, and people, I don't think they appreciated it for everything that it was at first, because on the surface, it's just a way to have something from one app pop up in another. But it really is different, because now, again, my whole idea of what an app is different. The things that run on the watch are extensions. The things that run on the car, they're not exactly extensions, but they're running on top of this whole QNX layer.
Yep.
And it's almost like teleportation. It's like, I forget what Jesse Char called them, projectables, instead of just wearables. But it's still my stuff. I go rent a car at an airport right now. Well, the last time I did it, it had Microsoft embedded still, and I had some form of connectivity. But in the future, I'll just plug in my phone. It'll be my environment. I'll just put on a band, maybe at Disney, and it'll be my stuff. And it won't be all this disconnected technology anymore. It'll be very much my personal environment wherever I go.
Yeah,
even on the plane.
It's the way it should be. And I get that it sort of scares the automakers, because they need to have control for any number of reasons, whether it's aesthetic, legal, safety. They need to have control over what can be done in there. I think they should. But at the same time, they need to recognize that we need to be able to do more with this stuff, and we need it to do more quickly.
Yeah, it's and there's going to be this tension. Like, we used to joke about this. Like, if you have a Domino's pizza app, is the Domino's pizza app, should it be a beautiful Android style app, a beautiful iOS app, or does it have to be a Domino's app? So people, and we talked about this with Firefox on the desktop for years. Do they service Firefox, the Mac, the PC? And that battle for identity now is we do this with watches now. Should a watch be like a computer, or should it be like a watch? Should it look like a computer, or should it look like a watch? And the preconceptions for people, or the opinions, vary wider than I think any computing technology previously.
I'm still amazed at all the people that consider Domino's pizza to be food. Let's start with that and go from there.
They take PayPal, they take Apple Pay, Phil, so I had to mention them.
I know, like they're the only company that
them and McDonald's. I have to
oh God,
I know.
No. Can we get some? Farmers market down the street takes Square. Yeah, I see. Nice. Square. I don't know. Yeah, it's funny how some of the things we should do the least are the first to adopt all this technology.
Well, they have massive, I'm guessing they have massive centralized infrastructure. It's sort of like when I looked at Apple Transit. Apple added transit back after years of not having it. And they have a couple cities around the world and like 300 in China. Because
what is Apple Transit?
the subway and bus and train directions. But they got 300 cities in China because China, it's not all these little tiny municipal fiefdoms. It's one centralized set of data that's controlled by one centralized power. And that makes it very easy to roll out.
So I don't think I sent it to you. I went into an Apple store in Beijing a few weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
It looked exactly like an Apple store everywhere else, believe it or not. And of course it does. And it was in a very Western looking mall, and it was just interesting. I don't know what I expected, but it was an Apple store in a mall, basically.
I went in. I used to travel to Asia much more frequently when I was younger, and I went into Pizza Hut in Hong Kong, and they said, "Oh, Canadian style pizza for you. We use Thousand Islands dressing instead of tomato sauce."
Oh,
that is not Canadian pizza.
That happens. Here, I'll show you the link right now. But yeah, I mean, it was an Apple store in China, and that was it. You know?
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's. I think the whole thing is super interesting because we don't realize, I think, sometimes in North America how big the Chinese market is and how close it is. I think they're already doing more mobile commerce than we are, and they might be. They're gonna, if not already, be one of the central places where people design phones for. Like right now, they get the same stuff we get. In the near future, we'll be getting the same stuff they get.
Yeah, and we're starting to do more Indian-specific stuff. We have a couple Indian guys who have been writing for basically all the sites for a while, and figured it was far past time to leverage them. And just they did a little primer for us over the weekend on the Indian market, and it's just incredible, how normal 2G and 3G data is there.
Yeah,
and like that's just the way it is, and the technology and the market itself kind of wraps itself around that to make it work. And here we just wouldn't put up with that at all. But
it's the presumptions too
are fascinating to me at this point.
It's the presumptions too. Like there was a small brouhaha about Apple using LTE to sort of fill in the gaps for bad Wi-Fi coverage, and the pushback was that's great for all of you who have unlimited data that's fast, but in countries where we pay per byte, that's going to result in enormous bills, and there really are different considerations.
Yeah, and the assumption that people would be okay with that and that you should do it by default. That's one of those things. Like one side of your brain makes perfect sense. I get it, but shows how limited our thinking can be, even for these gigantic companies that should probably know better.
Yeah, that's one of the, because I asked a bunch of interface people what their solution would be, because we're getting prompt fatigue. Like, do you make everything ask a question? Because then people will get so tired of all these boxes popping up, they'll turn them off or they'll ignore them. If you don't have a box, do you default to off and then maybe people never discover it? Do you default to on and maybe hurt people who don't want to use it? We have all this stuff coming to set up an iPhone now. There's like 30 screens or something you have to go through. But if you start, I forget, I think Sprint was found to be installing certificates to get rid of them. But then people aren't informed about their privacy and their location services. And it's a lot of stuff to balance. It
is. If you haven't listened to it, Russell Ivanovich and Chris Lacey, a couple awesome Aussie developers, did a really good podcast on that. I've been slowly making my way through it, and it's just sort of like it's a constructive criticism of a lot of Apple gripes these days, and not just iOS, but iOS and Mac and services, and they spend a lot of time on the setup and those pop-ups. And I tell you, it's been interesting with Android 6 as we've changed to runtime notification, runtime permission notifications, same sort of thing, seeing how developers have handled it. And I think we still have a long way to go, because there just aren't that many. We're seeing new apps all the time. They're updating to this new framework. And we just did ours. So it's been interesting to see when the pop-ups show up, how much I care about them. Does it really bother me? No. I'm generally kind of smart about this stuff, though. I get why something wants my storage all of a sudden. But you have to be able to educate people as to why it's doing this. Do you do that once and hope they get it the rest of the time? No. Do you need to do it every time? Probably not. So it's been a really interesting learning curve. And again, we're way early on that. I mean, we've got like 3% of a billion plus devices are on this new OS, and then a smaller subset of apps are updated to use that. So got a long way to go on that still.
Yeah, I forget when iOS did it, but I noticed a difference, because for a while you would get them the minute you launched the app. Can I use, like for a Twitter app, can I use your Twitter account? Can I use your camera? Can I use your location? And there was like 5 or 6 of them. And like you start just pressing OK, like after a while. And then they went to doing it when they needed it. But then you might be busy doing something and you hate to be interrupted. Like, I just want to share this photo. Oh, can I use your camera? Yes, get out of my way. And at the same
I think the modal notifications like that are pretty seamless at this point. They're not nearly as bad as they used to be. And I actually misspoke a minute ago. It's not 3% of devices. It's 0.3%. Still not a small number when you're talking overall context, but very, very small in the scheme of things.
Yeah, we still get like there's still active notifications too. Like if something is using your mic or using your camera and you leave the app, you get a big banner saying your mic is being used or your camera is being used. But then I go to battery shaming and it says Facebook, or it says, for example, Twitter on screen for an hour, background for 2 minutes. Facebook on screen for 2 minutes, background for an hour. And it's just like all this stuff just keeps hitting your device.
Yeah, and in some ways you have to just take that. It was funny when Marshmallow first came out. I had an original Nexus 5. I just couldn't get Doze to work. That's the background feature that all but turns off the phone when it's just, it has to lay still. I think it's like 45 minutes or something. And then it just all but completely shuts down and you get this ridiculously good standby time. But for me, it just wasn't working. I had some app, and I never did dive into it to figure out what it was, but some app that was keeping that from happening. And it's being able to catch things like that and figure out why things aren't working. And it's a big give and take, and it's always going to be parts of it are going to work awesome until they don't. And that's where forums come in. And that's where we make money.
Well, it's interesting because battery chemistry, I mean, it changes, but it changes so slowly. There's no Moore's law for battery. Yep. And right now, whatever has radiation costs you power. So if the screen is radiating light, if the radio is transmitting something, if the processor is radiating heat, that's what drains your battery. So they're all, like Apple's doing stuff like you turn your phone upside down, it stops lighting up the screen for lock screen notifications. The iPad Pro will actually cycle down to 30 hertz if it's not detecting active input to stop having to update the screen. And this is all sort of chicanery. This is like man behind the scenes wizardry to try to eke out as much battery life as possible, because these devices, the more you use them, the more they get used. It's a very simple formula.
Yeah, and a lot of that's just kind of normal software stuff, and it's just a matter of them figuring out how best to do it and how they want to do it. I mean, it's funny you mentioning the big giant notification that says something is running in the background. We just get a little icon that sits up there until you pull it down, and then you can see what it is. And
this is on the status bar, and it's a luminescent color that flashes saying your mic is being used.
Yeah, but that's a good thing, right? You need to be alerted to that stuff.
Well, we had this brouhaha this morning where the bank that I used, it turns out they have a line in their terms of service that says they can monitor all your web and app activity. And there was a little bit of FUD in it because the security expert they used said, oh, well, anyone can pull anything, any app can pull anything it wants from your device and they can follow you all over the internet. And well, that's technically not true. That's not true at all.
Quite.
But the argument was, well, your parents won't know if they're just popping up all the camera permission and contact permission things. So I don't know how much we want to, infantilize our parents on technology, but also these apps do throw a ton of information at you. And if someone asks, if you're not into computers and they says, I want to use your storage, is that really human readable?
I think we need to take some responsibility for the things we use. We can't just say, well, it didn't tell me, or I didn't see it. We need to have some responsibility to understand these things. At the same time, the companies need to work at making it readable. And that's one that I think that Google failed at for a long time, particularly with permissions. It was written in this engineering speak that sounded scary as hell. And on one hand, maybe it should sound scary as hell. This is a lot of our data we're talking about. But on the other hand, if you're Chicken Little, then you're not really being of much use either.
Yeah, well, you had to write some regular articles saying, no, Facebook is not trying to take over your phone.
Yeah. And it doesn't help when you have, the state of media today is just to repeat, and then repeat, and then repeat, and then repeat. I'm sorry, I got caught up there. We just refuse to take our time and think about things and then think about, then read a dissenting opinion and make up our own minds. But there are these truths that we're just ignoring. And one of those is, at the end of the day, we have this option whether or not to use this phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever. And we have to take some responsibility in that.
Yeah, it is. That was one of my issues with security writing in general, is that when you make everything scary, suddenly nothing is scary anymore. And you inoculate people. And there are some things that you do have to be worried about. There will be bad things that happen. We had a really bad update. I think it was iOS it was 8.1 or 9.1. I forget which one it was now, but it was a bad update and it basically killed your connection. And those things will happen. And I have to be able to trust you when you tell me that this is bad, don't install it, wait for this. This is how you fix it. But if there was an article a month ago that said that, Siri, Google Now, and Cortana weren't secure because some guy with a huge backpack or van could sit 16 feet away and beam things to your headphone jack. So,
yeah, my take on all that, I think, is fairly pragmatic. One is it goes back to the simple: if two people know something, it's not a secret. I think with any electronic device, it has the potential for somebody to get into it if you don't want them to. That's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. I think what Apple is saying and largely what it's doing with the security thing is the right reason. I also agree that in some ways it's smoke and mirrors a little bit, that they are propping that up instead of, while they need to be fixing things, not instead of fixing things, but they're propping that up while they need to be really working on some user experience stuff. I don't think there's anyone out there who's actively making a smartphone that is inherently unsafe. And that's
I don't know. I read that BlackBerry copy, Phil.
Oh my God, that was hilarious. Yeah, BlackBerry's all, so here's the thing about Android, it's unsafe. Now here's why you should use our Android phone. Which I get it, but no, stop. No, I think at the same time, we need to take responsibility and say anything I put in this phone, I know that there's a potential that it could get out, whether it could get out, I accidentally post something, whether a service I'm using, something nefarious happens there, whether, they do it on purpose, whether it happens to them. And that chain, as it gets longer, so does the potential for bad things to happen.
And this is nothing new. I mean, in the old days, if you dropped your wallet, someone would get your wallet. If you sent a letter, someone could sit there and try and steal the letter. I mean,
right.
This is a new version of old problems.
Yeah, and the problem is it grew exponentially. So now we have payment stuff. Now we have pictures. Now we have contacts. My wife and I had some fascinating discussions when all the celebrity nude leaks came out last year before, whenever that was. And she is very much of the mind that it's okay to say, no, I'm not taking pictures like that because of that very possibility. But there was this other argument that said, well, you can't even make that argument. That's unfair. It's wrong. Well, no, it's not. That's basic logic, right? If you don't want, C to happen, then you take out one of the variables A plus B. And I think we need to remember that sometimes.
Well, there's stuff you have control over, and there's stuff that you don't have control over.
Jerry's the same way with fingerprint stuff. He doesn't want to use fingerprint because you can't change your fingerprint if that data were to get out and be compromised somehow. It makes sense. Is it a little over the top? Maybe. But again, that's his decision to do it.
So the iMore Show is brought to you today by lynda.com, the online learning platform with over 3,000 on-demand video courses to help you strengthen your business, technology, and creative skills. For a free 10-day trial, visit lynda.com/imore. That's lynda.com/imore. Lynda.com is for problem solvers, for the curious, for people who want to make things happen. Maybe you want to master Excel, learn negotiation tactics, build a website, boost your Photoshop skills. Go to lynda.com and feed your curious mind, especially now, especially all these new applications, all this new technology is coming out. It can be a lot to take in, and it can be sort of intimidating to get started. I know that's the thing for me is I look at a skill set and I say, oh, it would take too long to get good at that, so I don't even try. But with lynda.com, you can just get in, you can get your feet wet, and because you're not around other people, there's no peer pressure, there's no teacher or other students kind of judging you. You're just watching the videos, and it's so liberating to be able to do that. And the awesome thing is, even if you don't need to watch the whole course, you can just jump in, try a couple of things that you really need to do immediately. You can get quick answers to solve your problems, and then you can get back out again. And you can watch and learn from top experts, people who are passionate about teaching. You can stream thousands of video courses on demand. You can learn at your own schedule, your own pace. You can go start to finish, or you can just look at them in bite-sized pieces. You can browse transcripts. You can search for answers. You can skip to the points that you need, take notes. You can download them to your iOS or Android device. You can create and save playlists. There's just so much you can do now. It's basically digital learning. It's making learning accessible to anyone at any time on almost any subject. There's just thousands of videos. So your membership gives you unlimited access to training on hundreds of topics, all for one flat rate. Whether you're looking to become an industry expert, you're passionate about a hobby, or just want to learn something new, I want you to visit lynda.com/imore and sign up for your free 10-day trial. That's lynda.com/imore. Thank you, Linda. Well, one of the big things that changed, I don't know if it was this year or last year, is that both Apple and Google decided to make their encryption not like they can no longer access their own encryption. And they did that. If you want to take the altruistic approach, they did that because they believe deeply in user privacy. If you want to take the more pragmatic approach, it's because they don't want to have to spend the time and effort unlocking phones at the behest of the government.
Yep.
But either way, the government is now pushing really heavily for some sort of backdoor. They don't want this encryption to be sort of complete. And it's interesting to see both Apple and Google's responses to it, because they're basically saying we're done. We can't do anything with those phones anymore.
I absolutely think they're both doing the right thing there, both from a selfish business standpoint, but also for us as users. Yes.
Yeah, because Apple apparently had a 9-month backlog on trying to brute force the phones running previous to iOS 7 for the government.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think, and we talked about this a little bit on the podcast a couple of weeks ago on the AC podcast, as the Paris stuff was going down and the encryption debate wrongly got raised again. No, I think our devices need to be encrypted. I think they should be encrypted. And I think anyone who wants to be able to get into them is going to need to work their asses off to get into my stuff. And I get that they're going to. And that's that part of the game. That's the cat and mouse thing. And go further, then there need to be checks on the government to be able to get in that stuff and how far they can go and how long their leash can be. But I get that there are going to be times they need to be able to do that. But yeah, by default, encrypt my stuff, please. Not please, do it.
It's funny because two of the things we talked about, I was rewatching some West Wing episodes and some Picket Fences episodes over the holidays. And two things struck me. One was there was an episode of Picket Fences where the sheriff decided he was going to preemptively fingerprint everybody, because that way it would just be safer because he'd have everyone's fingerprints on file. Sure. And of course, this being a TV drama, that there's a life lesson to be learned here, that you can't act that way, because like you can't just presume everyone's guilty and go from there. And then on the West Wing, I was watching where they said, the New York Times has a story, which means it'll be in print in 24 hours. And within 3 days, the entire world will know about it. And we only have 3 days to get on. And I was just thinking how much the internet world has changed, because you wouldn't have 3 minutes today to get in front of a story.
You really wouldn't. No, I was thinking about that as I was scheduling a family vacation. It'll be the first time my kids fly. It's like, all right, well, they don't really need IDs to do it, but maybe we just go ahead and get them. But that, we'll go ahead and get their data into a system somewhere. Do I really want to do that? But their data is already in a system somewhere. And how much do I care? And does it really matter? Or should it be their choice? And it's like, oh my God, it's so hard to be a parent these days. It's not that hard.
My godkid's school switched to Google for everything, and now they have Chromebooks and they all have Google accounts. Some of the parents were like, I don't want my kid to have a Google account. And it's not specifically Google, but it's like they did not want them to have any sort of online presence, Facebook, Google, anything.
It's really tough. My oldest daughter's 9. She's got an Android phone just because that's easiest for us. I've got a Google Apps account and I did that really because I can control, aspects of it. I can't control everything she sees. I get that, but I can control some things. I'm going to for a while still, but some of her friends have Instagram accounts and she doesn't really need to and stuff like that. And I don't know what the answer is. There is no right answer. I think there are a lot of wrong answers. But there's definitely not one right answer there.
Well, it's interesting, the Vector too, because their video game consumption is incredibly tightly controlled. But the minute you log into Google, they have all these little Easter eggs where you can go there and suddenly you're Pac-Man on Google Maps in your area. Sure. And that's a game for them. And they're not supposed to be doing it, but it's part of their school Google account and it's right one click away. And it's all, again, like it's these things that we didn't have to worry about managing previously.
Yeah, no, it's tough for me, and I'm pretty good at this stuff. And I can't even imagine how it is for somebody who doesn't do this for a living.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because we have all these, again, with kids, we have all these social networks. And when I was a kid and I did stupid things, only the people there knew about it. But now potentially that's a YouTube video, that's an Instagram video, that's a photo, that's I was joking. We have a mutual friend who puts up pictures of her kids having tantrums, and I'm like, they're going to be teenagers one day. They're not going to look at that fondly. She goes, well, I'm not looking at it fondly now.
Yeah, I get some of that. I'd still put out stuff I shouldn't sometimes, but I don't know. Part of me just doesn't care. Part of me knows better.
It's these things that we did not have to even worry about. Like previously, the old cliche was your kid would start dating. They come over to the house. Your parent would take out the album of the kid's pictures and start embarrassed. Look at her. She dressed up as Wonder Woman when she was 5. Wasn't she cute? Yeah. But now they don't have to go to your house for that. They can. The minute you meet somebody, you're checking their Google profile, you're checking their Instagram, you're checking their Twitter.
Yeah, no, and I'm still a little careful on what I allow people to see sometimes, but not always.
So, I have another question for you, and I didn't actually intend to bring this up, but this is interesting to me because we had app.net come and go. Google Plus has changed radically over the last year. I guess it's safe to say. Like I went there this morning to start this Hangout, and the whole Hangouts interface is pared down now. It's not just that the social networks are changing, but the way that we use them and the way that they're focusing is changing around us quickly.
One of the more important features that most services have, and I think we don't go back into them enough, is the ability to see what other services are hooked into those services. Twitter can do it. Google can do it. I imagine Apple can do it. I don't think I've ever used it there. I should probably take a look. Because even though I don't really use my Apple ID very many places, chances are, I mean, is it relatively open? Can you hook other things into it?
No.
No. Okay. So there's some of the help there.
Yeah.
But Facebook, same thing, right? And just any number of services over the years that have been used or have died or, unhooked them.
Yeah, we saw that there was I didn't get a clear answer, but Amazon sent out an email with password resets this week, and it wasn't clear if they'd had a breach, if they'd checked other sites that had breaches, compared those with their email addresses and sent them off. But it just shows you, like, you can log in with Facebook to a whole bunch of sites. You can log in with Twitter to a whole bunch of sites. People still use the same password for a whole bunch of sites. And there's so much stuff that has so much access now that you may not realize all the things that it can do with it.
Yeah, two things I would love to see, and one is bad. Not bad. One is single sign-on. I think is really important for usability. I'm back and forth on whether it's good from a security standpoint, because on one hand, it's one place that it's one fix, right? If I really need to change things, I just change that password or unhook everything and everything's gone. But on the other hand, it's so easy to just sign into things with my Google account or my Twitter account. But the other is two-factor authentication. And if you're not using that, you need to. My issue comes when you have a place that doesn't have single sign-on and also has two-factor, because then it's kind of a pain in the ass. Then you have to go dig up the password, and password apps on Android are still a little slow on the uptake. I'm still waiting on 1Password to bring fingerprint support, and I think it's going to help a lot.
Yeah. It's great. With fingerprint support, it's better than it is on a computer.
Yeah. So that's going to change some things. But two-factor authentication, I think, is a huge deal. I haven't taught my kids that yet. My wife sort of gets it, and she doesn't use it on many things, though. So I like, the more you use it, the more sense it makes. And that's the point there. Like, she just doesn't have to use it very often. I just turned it on for Amazon this morning, actually.
And it works better. Like when it first started coming out, I always tried it immediately because I wanted to write about it. And more often than not, I would never get the second token, and then I would not be able to get into my account, and I have to figure out a way to go in and turn it off and turn it back on. But now it's reliable enough that I think normal humans can start using this stuff.
Yeah, it's still part of that give and take. The Google Authenticator app is fine. It's great. It's really good. The problem is it doesn't. It only works on one device at a time, and then you have to completely set it up again on the next device. So for me personally, that's a non-starter because of the business I'm in. Whereas in an app like Authy, it will move that data over. So the question is, where's that data being saved? How's it being saved? What other checks are in place, to keep somebody else, if they did get my password, and that's oversimplified, but if they were able to load up my Authy account, what checks are in place to keep them from being able to get my two-factor authentication codes. And, there's the matter of getting it installed on their phone. There are like 3 and 4 different layers of security in there. And not any one of them is huge, but it's just enough to make it where I feel okay using that.
Well, I have nowhere nearly the amount of devices you get every year, but even I got 3 iPads this year, 2 iPhones, and an iPod Touch, and it doesn't sync anything. Like, you have to set up your fingerprints. Oh, it syncs a lot of stuff, but for security, nothing gets synced. You have to set up your fingerprints separately, your credit card, like your Apple Pay stuff separately.
And generally speaking, it shouldn't be, right? Android Pay, it has, so anything that's in your Google account, like I've got like 3 or 4 credit cards in there, and anything it has access to, but you still have to go back and put in the what's it, CVC, whatever the secondary number is. You have to be able to give it that. Some of mine, and this is where it's kind of interesting, like my bank card, I have to call each time and get them to reapprove it, which is fine. Not a huge deal, and probably not something I need to be putting on every phone anyway. So it's just kind of a matter of
Mine are emails. I get emails. I have to put in the code from the email into the thing to authenticate it.
Sure. Yeah. And some of mine, I have to do that. It's been interesting to see how each one does it. And I was surprised to see there's not one way of doing it.
Well, you guys, so I went to San Francisco again 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was amazing to me how far the US had, because we used to make fun of, you guys were so far behind in payment technology. Like we've had pin and chip and tap to pay everywhere, almost everywhere for 5 years now, I think more than that. And it was just nowhere in the US. Everything was swipe and sign. And I went back this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there was tap to pay and the chip almost well, in San Francisco, a big city, but they were in a lot of places that had them now.
The credit card stuff is still a mess. Tap to pay is getting better. I tell you what's really incredible there is Samsung Pay. They have the magnetic, what do they call it? Magnetic stripe. I forget what it is.
Magnetic strip.
Really awesome, because think of anywhere you go and use a credit card during the day, and then look at that terminal and see if it actually says that it does tap to pay. The vast majority of the ones that I go to don't. So here you have this technology in this phone that lets you just tap anywhere that can take a card, and it's pretty awesome. I really wish it wasn't only limited to Samsung, but they've done something really well there. Now that said, I think a long ways into the future, but at some point we won't be swiping cards anymore, right? So maybe it's a limited thing and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I have not swiped a card 3 or 4 years. It's so much that when I go to the US and I have to swipe a card, I forget that they have that functionality.
Sure.
But our problem here is we have nationally chartered banks that have no interest in Google Pay or Apple Pay because they make ungodly amounts of profit and don't want to share them with anybody.
We're 2 months into US companies not being forced to take chip cards, but they're now on the hook should there be fraud from swiping. And I only have like one place that uses chip cards now. Oh. It's really weird. And actually, it's Target. It's really good about it. If you swipe your card, it'll be like, hey, your card has a chip. Stick it in here instead. So that's smart. That's the way to do things. But it's not everywhere yet.
So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, Phil, was the sort of the television stuff. And I remember you fondling your Nexus Q. And now you've got a whole new generation of Android television. I've got a new Apple TV, but it still feels like they're good in that we get the iTunes stuff and the Google Play stuff and the Netflix stuff and HBO stuff, depending on, what region you're in, of course, but there still hasn't been a big TV moment the way there was a music moment. You still just can't get most things, most places.
Those industries are tough. They're tough and they're draconian. It's getting better slowly, but everyone's got their hand in that pie. It's been interesting to see Hulu kind of come around, and Hulu's getting a lot more content and a lot better. But now I'm paying for Netflix. Now I'm paying for Amazon. Now I'm paying for Hulu.
It gets expensive, right? Like everyone wants to unbundle stuff, but the unbundled stuff is expensive.
Yeah, it's not fun for me as a consumer. I would rather, pay Apple or Google or whomever, $20 a month to be able to get a whole bunch of stuff. And I still pay for all sorts of things a la carte. At some point, will it suss itself out? Maybe. I don't know. It's, it's the same thing with music. And I was thinking about it. There's that limit on Android devices. Again, it affects very few of us, but it's still a very weird, real thing where you can add Google Play Music to 10 devices at once, but only deauthorize 4 devices in a year, which, makes no sense, but but there's no parity, right? It's not that way for TV and movie content. I can watch that on any number of devices, any number of times I want. Once I pay my $5 and I buy my movie, I can watch it on, any of the 3,000 tablets or phones that are in here. Nobody cares.
Because it's still DRM'd and the music isn't, and they're worried that you're just going to go to your friend's place and take all their music.
It's so silly. It really, really is.
And it feels like you can tell who's on the wrong side of history on this, but from their point of view, it's just fear. We're afraid. Everyone's taking all our stuff. We're never going to recover.
Yeah, and meanwhile, it's all going to streaming anyway.
Meanwhile, Apple Music is on Android now, and Apple's giving 30% of all subscriptions to Google Play.
Yeah,
amazing world.
It's, and I need to try that some more. I'm not one of those guys who uses 5 streaming services. I use Google Play Music just because it's easiest, and I don't really like playlists anyway. I like albums.
My thing is like I listen to music opportunistically, so if it's just on, I listen to it, and because radios have gone away, I've lost that. But now I use Siri all the time. I just say play me this, and whatever this is what's in my head at the time, and it just plays. And to me, that's magic. So I'm listening to more music than ever because I get what I want with like almost no effort.
You know, and we didn't talk a lot about them, but Amazon's still lurking out there.
Yeah,
they still have what I think is the best connected home thing in the Echo. If you haven't tried one, if you can get one cheap, they
don't support Canada, Phil, so screw them.
Yeah, I mean, there's that too, but basically, it's taken like the best of all of the of Google Now and Siri and all that stuff, and packed it into this little thing that works pretty amazingly for what it is.
Well, I think people still look at them as a book/retailer, and really they're a cloud infrastructure company, and we don't pay enough attention to that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Massive amounts of power in the up there in the invisibles.
Yep.
All right, Phil. So what's on the horizon for Android Central? What's coming? Is the rest of the year down now? Or you have any more major releases?
No, I think that's it. I'm not even traveling until CES. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. For the hardware manufacturers, it's going to be manufacturing hardware. The fingerprint implementations is going to be a big thing, I think. We're seeing people like Huawei really get into the U.S. market now. So I'm real curious to see where they go. We've got this mid-range that is just getting ridiculously good. The sub $500 phone.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a continued shift in that space and people buying fewer phones that are locked to the carriers full of crap you don't want. But at the same time, it's been interesting watching, you mentioned the Sprint thing with the was it certificates or whatever?
Yeah, enterprise certificates.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, okay, that's welcome to our world. It's been really interesting to see those.
But they're enhancing the customer experience.
No,
Phil.
they're not. Stop it, Sprint.
Are there any, because like what I'm looking at for the holidays, I think people are going to be buying wearables like the Fitbits, like the Apple Watches, like the Android Wears. I think the home boxes are going to be popular. I also think home automation is still not there yet, but I think it's getting, like I just put in the HomeKit version, the Hue lights. And I on one hand, I love walking around my house, telling it to turn on and off lights and change them. On the other hand, it is more work than just flipping a switch.
Yeah, I tell you, I walked into Best Buy and I'm still a little intimidated just by the sheer amount of junk there is. And I don't know where to start. And again, I'm pretty smart at this stuff, but I have no idea.
So keep reading Android Central.
Yeah, start there. That's a good place to start.
And if they want to follow you on the internet, Phil, where are you?
I am one of those weird people who uses my real name on everything. So Phil Nickinson on all the things.
All right, you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at Android Central or at iMore. Thank you all for watching. I like doing these crossovers, Phil. It's like the Arrow and Flash specials.
It's been fun. We should leave in the part where I disappeared for like 5 minutes and went and got coffee.
And I want to once again thank Red Hat for sponsoring the show. They are basically open source software in the enterprise. They make sure you get all the benefits of open source without all the risk. Just go to Red Hat, different for the sake of better technology, redhat.com.